The red light on Harper's camera blinked from the windowsill, aimed straight at the hospital door. Every time the elevator chimed in the hallway, my daughter lifted her head from the pillow. Her left leg was locked inside a brace. Her right wrist was wrapped in a cast. 2 days earlier, a car had slammed into the passenger side of mine and sent us spinning through an intersection. It was her 14th birthday. "Did Grandma answer?" she asked. I looked down at the family group chat. I had written one simple message: Harper is awake. She does not want presents. She only wants to see everyone for a few minutes today. My mother replied first, "I'm busy." "Is this really that important? We can celebrate when she is home." Then my sister Melissa reacted with a laughing emoji. "Not in the mood for hospital drama today." I stared at those words until the letters blurred. Harper was watching my face, trying to read the answer before I gave it to her. I typed one word: "Okay." Then I left the group and blocked every one of them. Harper's expression did not change at first. That was what frightened me most. "You blocked them?" she whispered. "Yes." Her eyes moved back to the door, then to the camera recording it. "Then how will we know if they change their minds?" I had no answer. 3 months later, that same empty doorway would fill an auditorium screen while my mother sat behind me and whispered, "Turn it off." But the film was not about revenge. It was about who came. By the time my family understood what they had lost, my daughter had finally stopped holding them together. Before I take you back to that hospital morning, tell me where you are listening from. Stay with me to see what happened next, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the rest of Harper's story. A few hours before I sent that message, I woke to the soft squeak of rubber soles and found Keisha Ward standing beside Harper's bed with a paper crown in her hands. Keisha had cut it from a yellow cafeteria menu and decorated it with blue stars. One side leaned lower than the other because she had assembled it during the night shift. "Hospital regulations require all 14-year-olds to wear extremely expensive jewelry on their birthdays," she said. Harper opened one eye. The medication made her movements slow, but the corner of her mouth lifted. "Is it insured?" "Absolutely not." Keisha settled the crown carefully above the small scrape near Harper's hairline. Harper winced when she shifted against the pillow, then hid it with a smile. She had been doing that since surgery. She tried to make every difficult movement look smaller so I would not worry. On the windowsill, her compact camera faced the closed door. I assumed she had placed it there because she filmed everything. Sunlight on old photographs, Piper laughing with milk coming out of her nose. My hands making Owen's terrible pancake recipe on the anniversary of his death. I did not ask why the lens was pointed at the hallway. Keisha offered to bring a cupcake from the cafeteria. Harper thanked her but said she was not hungry. I asked whether she wanted balloons, a bigger cake after lunch, or a video call with her classmates. "I don't need a party," she said. Her voice was thin from fatigue. "Could Grandma and Grandpa come? And Aunt Missy? Just for 10 minutes. The request sounded so small that I answered too quickly. "Of course they can." My parents lived 35 minutes from Riverton Children's Hospital. Melissa lived a little farther away, but she worked for herself and controlled most of her schedule. They had known about the accident since the first night. They knew Harper had undergone surgery to stabilize her broken femur. They knew her right wrist was fractured and that the doctors were watching her for symptoms from a mild concussion. I believed a birthday would give them a reason to stop being afraid of the hospital and simply show up. Harper looked toward the door when the elevator chimed. "They might come before lunch," she said. "I'll message them now." I opened our family group chat and typed carefully. I did not describe the screws, the pain, or the way Harper had cried when 2 nurses helped turn her in bed. I did not want guilt to be the invitation. I told them she was awake, that she did not want gifts, and that her only birthday wish was to see everyone for a few minutes. Harper watched me press send. The message showed as delivered almost immediately. "Walter." My father read it first. His small profile picture appeared beneath the text. He did not answer. My mother read it next. Then Melissa. For a moment, 3 dots appeared on the screen. Harper noticed them too. Grandma's typing. The dots vanished. They returned, then vanished again. Linda's response finally appeared. I'm busy. Is this really that important? We can celebrate when she is home. My stomach tightened. I read the words twice, searching for some kinder meaning hidden inside them. There was none. Before I could decide what to say, Melissa added a laughing reaction to my message. Not in the mood for hospital drama today. Walter's picture remained beneath the conversation. He had seen everything. He still said nothing. I felt the same cold clarity that had come over me at the intersection, after the impact, when smoke filled the car and Harper stopped answering me. Back then, I had unfastened my seatbelt, forced my door open, and climbed across broken glass toward her before anyone could tell me to wait. I acted the same way now. Okay. I sent it, left the group, and blocked Linda, Walter, and Melissa one after another. Each name disappeared from my screen like a door locking. For one brief second, it felt good. Clean. Final. Then I looked up. Harper's face had gone still. The tablet on her tray was dark except for the faint reflection of my phone. I realized she had seen the messages backward in the glass. You don't have to tell me, she said. I set my phone down. Harper. I saw Grandma's answer. I saw the emoji too. Her eyes were dry, which made the room feel more dangerous than if she had cried. She looked toward the door as another elevator chimed. A man carrying flowers passed without slowing. You blocked them? She asked. Yes. Why? Because I am not letting them hurt you again. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. The cast made the movement awkward. What if Grandpa was going to call? What if Grandma changed her mind? Then she should have thought before she wrote that. That isn't what I asked. I took a breath. You are lying in a hospital bed on your birthday. You should not have to wait for people who need time to decide whether you matter. Harper turned her face away from me. I wanted her to feel protected. Instead, I watched her shoulders pull inward. You always do that, she said. Do what? Decide what hurts me most before you ask. The words landed without force, but they cut deeper than shouting would have. I reached for her hand and stopped before touching it. Do you want me to unblock them? I don't know. Do you want me to call Grandpa? I said I don't know. Pain and exhaustion sharpened her voice. A second later, guilt crossed her face. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. She looked at the camera on the windowsill. Its red light continued to blink. Can you turn that off? I asked. Harper shook her head. Not yet. Keisha returned with a small vanilla cupcake and one candle, then paused when she felt the silence in the room. She did not ask questions. She set the cupcake on the tray, adjusted Harper's water, and told us she would come back when Harper was ready. That simple kindness almost broke me. Harper did not make a wish. She watched the flame until it bent under the air vent, then let me blow it out for her. The chair beside her bed remained empty through lunch. It stayed empty when the physical therapist came, when Piper sent a video of our classmates singing off-key, and when the afternoon light moved across the floor. Near sunset, Harper glanced at the camera. Did it record all day? Yes. The whole time we waited? I looked at the empty chair, the closed door, and the small red light still blinking. Yes? Harper swallowed and closed her eyes. I don't know if I want to keep that, she said, but I don't want to erase it yet. Harper kept the recording. She did not watch it that night. She asked me to remove the memory card from the camera and place it inside the plastic cup beside her bed, where the nurses had stored her rings and hair ties. Then she closed her eyes and said she was tired. I sat beside her while the hallway lights dimmed. The empty chair remained between us and the door. I had spent the day believing that chair represented my family's failure. After what Harper had said, it also represented a decision I had made for her. Near midnight, She woke when the medication pump beeped. I helped her sip water, and her gaze settled on the cup. "That card has Dad on it too," she murmured. I thought the medication had confused her. "Your dad?" "Not that recording. The project." After the nurse checked her blood pressure, Harper asked me to open the laptop in her backpack. Piper had brought it to the hospital with Harper's camera charger and a sweatshirt that said, "Film now, panic later." The screen filled with folders bearing dates, names, and thumbnail images. One folder sat at the top. "The People Who Made Me." "What is this?" I asked. "My documentary for Miss Alvarez." Reina Alvarez taught media arts at Harper's school. At the end of the previous semester, she had assigned every student a short documentary built around one question: who or what had shaped the person they were becoming? Harper had chosen our family. She opened the project with her left hand, moving slowly because every shift pulled at the repaired bone in her thigh. A title card appeared over an old home video of Owen kneeling in our kitchen, trying to flip a pancake with one hand while 9-year-old Harper laughed behind the camera. My husband had died 5 years earlier from an undiagnosed heart condition. There had been no warning and no final conversation. One morning, he kissed us goodbye. By dinner, the hospital had placed his wedding ring in my palm. For months, Harper worried that she was forgetting him. Not the large facts, but the pieces no obituary could hold. The way he whistled only half of a song. The pause before he laughed. The exact sound of his voice when he called her Bug. We had only a handful of videos where he spoke clearly. After that, Harper began recording everyone. At first, it looked like grief finding a hobby. She filmed my mother explaining how to make peach preserves. She recorded Walter repairing a lamp. She captured Melissa telling the same story 3 ways because Melissa believed every version should be funnier than the last. I had called Harper our family historian. I had never asked what she feared would happen if she stopped. On the laptop, Owen's pancake video faded into an interview with Linda. My mother sat upright in her living room, silver hair perfect, hands folded over one knee. "Family is the one thing you do not walk away from," Linda said on screen. "Traditions keep people close, especially when life gets difficult." Harper paused the video. She liked that answer. She asked me to use it near the beginning. 12 hours earlier, Linda had asked whether visiting her injured granddaughter was really that important. Harper clicked through more interviews. Walter spoke from his workshop about loyalty. Melissa sat beneath a ring light and said family meant knowing someone would always show up, even when you were not at your best. Each answer had seemed warm when Harper recorded it. Now every sentence sounded like evidence against the person speaking. "Grandma wanted these for the anniversary," Harper said. Linda and Walter's 40th wedding anniversary was scheduled for early September. My mother had reserved a private room at the Riverton Conservatory, ordered engraved glasses, and mailed invitations before summer began. She had asked Harper to turn the interviews into a short film for the celebration. Harper had agreed immediately. "I was going to finish both versions together," she explained. "The school one would be longer. Grandma's would have more wedding pictures and less of Aunt Missy talking." Despite everything, I smiled. That sounds wise. The timeline showed an empty space at the end of the project. "What was supposed to go there?" I asked. Harper looked toward the hospital door. "This. I wanted them to come in together. Not all at once if the nurses wouldn't allow it, but enough that I could film everyone around the bed." She shifted, winced, and waited for the pain to pass. "Then I was going to ask one question." "What question?" "What does family mean when life gets hard?" The room seemed to contract around me. Harper had not pointed the camera at the door simply because she wanted proof that they came. She had been preparing a surprise ending for a film that honored them. She had tried to turn a broken leg, a fractured wrist, and a hospital birthday into a new family memory. They had answered her question without entering the room. My phone vibrated on the tray. An unfamiliar Riverton number had called 3 times that evening. "Is that them?" Harper asked. "I don't know. You blocked them, so they're probably using other phones." The call stopped. A voicemail appeared, followed by two more from different numbers. I turned the phone face down. Harper's jaw tightened. "You're not going to listen?" "Not tonight." "You mean you're not going to let me listen?" "You've had surgery. You're exhausted. And they're talking about me. I'm trying to protect you. By making sure you know everything first?" Her voice cracked. She closed her eyes, breathing through pain and anger. I wanted to defend myself. Instead, I remembered what she had said that afternoon. I could not know what hurt her most without asking. I placed the phone on the blanket beside her. "We can stop whenever you want," I said. "Or wait." Harper studied me. "Stay." "I'm staying." The first message came from Linda, calling from a neighbor's phone. "Samantha, everyone is upset, and no one was thinking clearly. This is becoming much larger than it needs to be. Harper knows we love her. There is no reason to punish the entire family over one scheduling problem. Call me when you are ready to be reasonable." There was no apology. She did not ask how Harper felt or whether her pain had improved. Harper pressed the next message. Walter's voice sounded low and uncertain. "Sam, it's Dad. I was going to come after lunch. Your mother thought we should wait until Harper was less tired. I should have called. Tell her Grandpa loves her." Harper stared at the phone. "He was going to come," I said carefully. "He didn't." The third message was Melissa. The laughing reaction was an accident. My thumb slipped, and if Harper thinks I was laughing at her, then she's being too sensitive. I said I wasn't in the mood for hospital drama, because Mom was already making everything stressful. "Please don't turn this into some permanent family feud." Harper's face flushed. "Turn it off." I stopped the message. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I did not explain why Linda minimized, why Walter hesitated, or why Melissa always made cruelty sound like a misunderstanding. I just sat beside Harper. The next morning, Keisha entered, pushing a cluster of balloons so large she had to tilt them through the doorway. Gold letters spelled "Happy Birthday," and a delivery card hung from one ribbon. "Your fan club found the gift shop," Keisha said, then saw Harper's expression and quietly placed the balloons in the corner. I opened the card only after Harper nodded. "We will celebrate properly when everything is back to normal. Love, Grandma, Grandpa, and Aunt Missy." Harper read it twice. Something stiff was clipped behind the card. I pulled out a folded note in Linda's handwriting. "Samantha, please have Harper send the anniversary hard drive by Friday. Melissa needs the interview files to finish the presentation, and we cannot delay the venue schedule." Harper held out her hand. I gave her the note. She looked from the balloons to the laptop, then back at my mother's words. "They didn't remember to come for me," she said, "but they remembered what I was doing for them." 3 days after Harper's birthday, the nurse at the front desk called my room phone and told me my parents were waiting downstairs. They had not called first. They had not sent another message asking whether Harper was awake, whether the pain medication was helping, or whether the doctors had decided when she could begin putting weight on her injured leg. They had simply arrived. I had added a visitor restriction to Harper's chart the morning after her birthday. Keisha had helped me complete it after I explained that some relatives might try to enter without permission. I had listed Piper, Miss Alvarez, and 2 neighbors who had offered to help. Linda, Walter, and Melissa were not on it. "Do you want security to ask them to leave?" the nurse asked. I looked at Harper. She was asleep after physical therapy, one hand curled against her chest. Sweat still dampened the hair near her temples. That morning, she had managed to sit upright, with both feet supported for almost 4 minutes. Everyone had called it progress. Harper had cried after the therapist left. "I'll go down," I said. The hospital lobby was bright and crowded, with sunlight reflecting off the polished floor. Linda stood beside the information desk wearing a navy dress and pearl earrings, as though she had come from lunch rather than to visit an injured child. Walter held a paper gift bag in one hand. There were pink balloons tied to its handle. Linda glanced at the security officer near the elevators before looking at me. This is humiliating. Not hello. Not how is Harper. You came without calling. She is our granddaughter. We should not need an appointment. She is a patient recovering from surgery. Linda lowered her voice, but the anger remained. Then let us go upstairs and resolve this misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. Samantha, I was busy. Your father was tired. Melissa already had plans. And Harper was safe in a hospital surrounded by professionals. We thought it made more sense to celebrate after she came home. She asked for 10 minutes. Birthdays can be celebrated again. Linda said it as if she were explaining something obvious to a difficult employee. The anniversary cannot, she continued. The conservatory is booked. The catering deposit is non-refundable, and relatives are traveling from 3 states. We cannot rearrange everything because you decided to turn one unpleasant afternoon into a family crisis. Walter shifted the gift bag from one hand to the other. Your mother is not saying we handled it perfectly. She has not said Harper's name once since I came down. His eyes moved toward the elevators. I brought her a gift. She did not ask for a gift. I know. I should have come that day. Linda gave him a sharp look. Walter's shoulders lowered, and I watched the apology die before it fully reached his face. I don't want this family torn apart over one bad afternoon, he said. The words were soft, almost pleading. That made them worse. You keep calling it an afternoon, I said. Harper calls it her birthday. Linda folded her arms. This is exactly what I mean. You are making every sentence sound cruel because you want to justify what you did. What I did was stop answering people who laughed at my daughter from a hospital bed. Melissa already explained that. As if summoned by her name, Linda's phone began to ring. She looked at the screen and answered on speaker. We're with Samantha now. Melissa's voice filled the space between us. Finally. Sam, can you please tell Mom where Harper put the anniversary drive? I have the music selected, but I cannot finish the presentation without the interviews. I stared at Linda. That is why you came. We came to see Harper, Walter said. Linda spoke over him. We came to do both. There is no reason everything else should stop while you are angry. Melissa sighed through the phone. The venue wants the final runtime by Monday. Harper has all the original clips, including Grandpa's workshop interview and the old wedding photos. I need the files today. Harper is not working on your presentation from a hospital bed. No one asked her to work. Just bring down the drive. You sent balloons with a note asking for it, before you asked whether she could stand. That is not fair, Linda said. We sent her birthday balloons. You attached a deadline. A family walked past us toward the elevators. A little boy held his mother's hand and dragged a stuffed dinosaur behind him. I forced myself to lower my voice. I am not discussing that hard drive until all 3 of you acknowledge what you said. Melissa laughed once, but there was no humor in it. I said my thumb slipped. You typed the next sentence. I was talking about Mom's drama, not Harper. You wrote it under a message asking you to visit her. Walter rubbed one hand across his face. Can we please stop doing this in public? Linda's expression hardened. That is what Samantha wants. She wants an audience so she can make us look heartless. I asked you to come upstairs 3 days ago. You blocked us before anyone could explain. You had already explained. You were busy. Linda stepped closer, keeping her voice quiet enough that only we could hear. You are using Harper to punish this entire family. For 1 second, every sound in the lobby seemed to move away from me. I thought of Harper staring at the door while the camera recorded an empty hallway. I thought of Linda's note clipped behind the birthday card. I thought of the way Harper had flinched when I said I was protecting her. My hands curled at my sides. You do not get to say that to me. Linda did not step back. Then stop proving it. Let us see her. Give Melissa the files. And end this. I wanted to shout. I wanted the nurses, the security officer, and every stranger in the lobby to hear exactly what they had done. Instead, I looked at Walter. Did you come because you wanted to see Harper? Yes. Would you have come if Melissa did not need the drive? His mouth opened, but Linda answered first. That question is insulting. Walter did not answer at all. I turned toward the elevators. You are not going upstairs today. Linda called my name, but I kept walking. Behind me, Melissa's voice rose from the phone, demanding that I come back. Security moved between my parents and the elevator doors before they could follow. By the time I reached Harper's floor, my anger had hardened into something heavy and cold. I had protected her from hearing them minimize her pain. I had also prevented her from hearing anything else they might have said. Harper was awake when I entered. Her laptop sat open on the rolling tray, but the screen had gone dark. They came, she said. I stopped beside the bed. How did you know? Grandpa left a voicemail. I had forgotten he still had Harper's number. What did he say? That they were downstairs and you wouldn't let them up. I pulled the visitor chair closer. They wanted to talk about what happened. Harper watched me carefully. Did Grandma ask to see me? Yes. Before or after she asked for the movie? The question caught me. They mentioned both. That isn't an answer. I don't know which mattered more to her. Harper pressed her lips together. Her eyes filled, but irritation reached her face before the tears could fall. You should have let me hear them. They were blaming me. Your aunt wanted the files. Your grandmother said your birthday could be celebrated later. So, I should have heard that. You are in pain. You barely slept last night. That does not mean I am stupid. I did not say that. You keep acting like if something is bad, I should not be allowed to know it until you fix it. I was trying to stop them from hurting you again. They already did. Her voice rose, and pain tightened her face. She shifted too quickly, then grabbed the blanket when the movement pulled at her leg. Harper, slow down. Do not tell me to calm down. I said slow down because you moved your leg. I know what you said. She turned her face away, breathing hard. A moment later, her anger collapsed into shame. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know this isn't your fault. Some of it is. She looked back at me. I was right not to let them walk into this room and pretend nothing happened, I said. But being right about them does not mean I was right to decide everything for you. Harper stared at the dark laptop screen. I want the computer from home. What for? I want to delete the documentary. I felt my chest tighten. You have worked on it for almost a year. It is my project. You are exhausted, angry, and taking medication that makes it hard to focus. You should not make a permanent decision tonight. Her expression changed immediately. There, you did it again. I am asking you to wait. No. You are deciding that my reason is not good enough because I'm hurt. I don't want you to destroy something you might want later. And I don't want their faces on my computer. Her voice shook. She shoved the laptop tray away with her good hand, then winced as the movement jarred her wrist. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I said, I will bring the computer from home. I will not open the project, copy anything, or touch a file unless you ask me to. Harper looked suspicious rather than relieved. And if I want to delete it? Then we will talk about what you want before you do it. I will listen first. That still sounds like you might say no. It means I am trying not to make another decision for you while also being honest that I am scared you will regret it. She wiped one cheek against the pillow. I hate this. I know. I hate them. Then I miss them. Then I hate myself for missing them. I reached toward her hand and waited. After a moment, she turned her palm upward. That evening, I brought her larger editing computer from home and placed it on the table beside the bed. I did not ask for the password. Harper opened the documentary herself. The interviews appeared along the timeline. Linda spoke about tradition. Walter spoke about loyalty. Melissa spoke about always showing up. Harper watched their faces without pressing play. If the people in this film are not who I thought they were, she said, then maybe the whole movie is a lie. The next afternoon, Reina Alvarez called while Harper was trying to eat soup with her left hand. Harper had refused the adaptive spoon Keisha brought because she said it made her feel 90. After spilling broth on the blanket twice, she accepted it without another argument. I held the phone on speaker near her pillow while Raina asked about the surgery, the concussion, and whether Harper could tolerate more than a few minutes of screen time. "The documentary can wait," Raina said. "I can extend your deadline as long as you need. You do not have to decide anything while you are recovering." Harper looked at the editing computer beside her bed. She had not opened the project since calling it a lie. "I want to send you the version I have now," she said. "You are not required to submit an unfinished film." "I know. I just want someone else to have it before I decide whether to delete it." Raina was quiet for a moment. "Then send me a draft, not a decision. Those are different things." Harper agreed. When the call ended, she shifted the computer tray closer and tried to use the trackpad with her left hand. Her movements were clumsy, and the cast on her right wrist kept catching against the edge of the blanket. "Can you export it?" she asked me. "Just the timeline as it is. Do not change anything." I pulled the chair beside her bed. "You tell me every step." She gave me the password and watched as I opened the editing program. The project loaded slowly, filling the screen with rows of interviews, photographs, voice recordings, and old home videos. I followed her instructions, selected the draft quality, and chose a temporary folder for the exported file. A list of recent locations appeared. At the top was a folder named Family Fixes. My hand stopped over the trackpad. "What is that?" Harper glanced at the screen, then away. "Nothing, just some stupid stuff." I selected the ordinary export folder beneath it. "Okay." The progress bar began to move. I did not ask again. I had promised not to search through her files, and curiosity was not permission. The export had reached 12% when Harper spoke. "Open it." I turned toward her. "You do not have to show me. It does not matter now. Everything is already broken." "That does not mean you owe me access to something private." Her face tightened with impatience. "Mom, just open it before I change my mind." I clicked the folder. Dozens of smaller folders filled the screen. Each carried a person's name, followed by months and years. Walter, Linda, Melissa, Samantha, Cousin Beth, Uncle Raymond, holiday calls, birthdays, apologies, anniversary plans. The first note I opened was dated 2 years earlier. "Grandpa and Grandma fought about the lake trip. Call Grandpa after dinner and remind him Grandma thinks he does not listen. Tell him to call her first so she will answer." Another note appeared beneath it. "Aunt Missy forgot Grandma's birthday card again. Buy one at Miller's Pharmacy. Sign Missy's name before Grandma sees the envelope." I looked at Harper. She stared at the ceiling. "You bought that card?" She paid me back. "That is not what I asked." "Yes." I opened another file. "Send Grandma the pictures from Piper's cookout. She saw them on Aunt Beth's page and thinks no one wanted her there. Do not mention that she was invited and said she was too tired." The next note had my name. "Remind Mom that Cousin Elaine's birthday is Friday. She will feel terrible if she remembers late." I remembered Harper mentioning Elaine while I was making dinner. I had praised her memory and ordered flowers before bed. There were call plans with times written beside them. Harper had phoned 2 cousins separately after they stopped speaking, listened to each complain, then invited both into the same video call under the excuse that she needed help identifying people in an old photograph. There were apology drafts, too. I should not have said that in front of everyone. I was embarrassed and tried to make you feel small. You did not deserve it. Below the sentence, Harper had written, "Send this to Aunt Beth from Uncle Raymond if he says he does not know what to write. Remove the second sentence if he gets defensive." My fingers went cold against the keyboard. Folder after folder contained the architecture of moments I had mistaken for spontaneous affection. Christmas calls had happened because Harper created individual reminders. Linda's annual family recipe exchange survived because Harper contacted everyone privately, collected the recipes, corrected the names, and sent the finished file back to Linda to distribute. The summer picnic Linda claimed to organize every year had a checklist in Harper's folder. Who needed a ride? Who was avoiding whom? Which foods could not be placed beside each other, because two relatives would argue over the serving table? Which child needed a quiet room when the crowd became too loud? I had watched my mother accept compliments for holding the family together. Harper had been doing it from her bedroom. A folder near the bottom was titled, "Don't Let Mom Know." I looked at her before touching it. "Do you want me to stop?" She pulled the blanket higher over her waist. "No." Inside were reminders she had hidden from me. "Tell Grandpa not to call Mom on Owen's birthday, unless he is willing to say Dad's name. Ask Aunt Missy to invite Mom directly, because Mom will pretend she does not care if she only hears about it through Grandma. Do not tell Mom Grandma forgot the hospital fundraiser. Say the invitation probably went to spam." One note ended with, "Mom already worries about me. She will think I am worrying too much." The words shifted on the screen. I pressed my palm against the desk because the room had begun to tilt. An audio file opened when my wrist brushed the trackpad. Linda's recorded voice filled the room. "Our family stays close because I do not allow people to drift apart. Someone has to protect traditions. Someone has to remind everyone that family comes first." The recording ended. Directly beneath it was Harper's note. "Remind everyone to call Grandma before she thinks no one cares." I could not speak. My throat tightened, and heat climbed into my face, while the rest of my body felt hollow. I closed the laptop halfway, not to hide the files, but because I could no longer look at them and look at my daughter at the same time. Harper watched my hands. "I was not trying to lie to you," she said. "How long?" She rubbed her thumb along the edge of her cast. "I started after Dad died." I sat down slowly. At first, nobody called each other because they did not know what to say. Grandma got angry that people avoided us. Aunt Missy made jokes whenever Dad's name came up. Grandpa stopped coming over because he cried in the garage and thought I did not know. Her breathing became uneven, so she paused. I thought if everyone stayed quiet long enough, somebody else would disappear. Maybe not die, but leave. Then I figured out that if I reminded people what to say, they called. If I told them when someone was hurt, they apologized. If I made things easy, nobody went away. I remembered every time I had called her thoughtful, mature, wise, beyond her years. I had treated those words like praise. She had been translating grief for adults, drafting apologies for people 3 times her age, and manufacturing traditions so no one would notice how little effort the people inside them were making. I opened the laptop again. The folders continued below the edge of the screen. I scrolled once, then again. There were more dates than I could absorb. "How long have you been doing all of this?" Harper stared at the list as if it belonged to someone else. "I don't remember exactly," she said. After a while, it did not feel like something I was choosing anymore. Harper came home 6 days after the accident. Getting her through the front door took nearly 20 minutes. Our porch had only 3 steps, but the temporary ramp the hospital arranged was steep enough that I kept one hand locked around the wheelchair handle, while our neighbor Daniel guided the front wheels. Harper tried to joke that she had always wanted a dramatic entrance, then went pale when we transferred her from the chair to the sofa. By the time I had positioned the wedge pillow beneath her injured leg, checked the brace, placed her water within reach, and lined up the afternoon medication, sweat had gathered along her hairline. The discharge nurse had warned me that movement would hurt more at home because there would be no adjustable bed or overhead bar. Hearing that had not prepared me for the sound Harper made when her thighs shifted half an inch too far. I had turned our living room into a recovery station. A whiteboard listed every medication and dose. Alarms were set on my phone. Clean towels, ice packs, crackers, charging cables, and the adaptive spoon waited in labeled baskets. I had even taped a route across the floor so the wheelchair would not catch on the rug. Harper looked around after the pain eased. "Did you plan where I'm allowed to breathe too?" "I wanted everything ready." "I know." Her tone made the words feel less like gratitude than surrender. At 4, my phone alarm chimed. I handed her the next dose, then checked the schedule I had printed. Piper is calling at 4:30. I told her 20 minutes would probably be enough for today. Harper looked up. You scheduled my call with Piper? She asked when you would be rested. You could have asked me. I knew physical therapy would wear you out, so I picked a time after your medication. That is not the point. The old answer rose immediately. I was trying to help. She needed rest. Someone had to manage the day. I heard every sentence before I said it, and recognized the same wall I had built in the hospital. I put the schedule down. You're right. I should have asked. Harper studied me, as though she expected a second half. I'll text Piper and tell her you will call when you choose. Do you want me to cancel for today or leave it open? Her shoulders loosened slightly. Leave it open. Maybe after dinner. I sent the message exactly as she requested. It was a small correction, but I understood that small decisions were where control learned to disguise itself as care. During the first week home, my family began to malfunction. Cousin Elaine called me because no one had remembered her birthday. Walter missed a cardiology follow-up that Harper usually reminded him about 2 days in advance, and again the morning of the appointment. Linda discovered she had invited one couple twice to the anniversary dinner, while leaving Walter's oldest cousin off the list entirely. Melissa sent the printer the wrong set of photographs. Half were low-resolution previews, and several were labeled only with numbers because she did not know Harper had organized the originals by year, branch of the family, and event. Every problem generated another call. Linda wanted to know whether Harper had a backup guest list. Walter asked if I remembered the name of his cardiologist's scheduling nurse. Melissa demanded the password to a cloud folder Harper had never promised to share. None of them began by asking whether Harper had managed the bathroom transfer without crying, whether the swelling had improved, or whether she could sleep through the night. On Thursday, Linda called while I was helping Harper complete the heel slide exercise prescribed by her therapist. Harper had to drag her foot toward her body without lifting the injured leg, a movement that looked almost meaningless until pain tightened every muscle in her face. I cannot keep repairing mistakes Harper normally catches, Linda said through the speaker on the kitchen counter. The anniversary is 5 weeks away, and no one knows which version of anything is current. Harper stopped moving her heel. I reached for the phone, but she shook her head. Linda continued. She does not have to work. She only needs to tell us where things are. Harper gave a quiet laugh that held no amusement. They finally noticed I'm useful. I ended the call before Linda could hear her. Harper stared at the ceiling. I used to think if I stopped reminding them for 1 week, everything would fall apart. You were right. I didn't want to be. Her good hand closed around the edge of the exercise strap. When the car hit us, I thought this was finally serious enough, she said. I thought I wouldn't have to remind them to come. The room went completely still around that sentence. Harper's eyes filled, but she kept talking. I didn't want to send 3 messages, or tell Grandpa what to say to Grandma, or ask Aunt Missy separately because group chats make her ignore things. I thought being in the hospital would be enough. Just once. I wanted them to choose me before I made it easy. I sat on the rug beside the sofa, close enough to reach her but not touching her until she moved her hand toward mine. I saw how thoughtful you were, I said. I saw the cards, the reminders, and the way everyone called you mature. I did not see that you were doing it because you were afraid people would leave if you stopped. Harper wiped her cheek against her shoulder. I should have seen it. You had Dad too. So did you. The answer was not cruel. That made it harder to accept. Owen's death had left both of us frightened of sudden absence. I had responded by organizing every practical detail I could control. Harper had responded by organizing people. Neither of us had understood what the other was carrying. Later that afternoon, Harper asked me to bring her phone. She scrolled through photographs from the hospital until she found one taken the morning after surgery. The sheet had slipped low enough to reveal part of the incision dressing and the bruising spreading across her thigh. Another showed her cast beside the paper crown Keisha had made. I want to send these to the group, she said. They're still blocked on my phone, but you can send them from yours. She looked at me sharply, surprised that I had not refused. What do you want them to feel when they see the pictures? I asked. Bad. What kind of bad? Harper's thumb hovered over the screen. I want Grandma to understand it wasn't just a birthday she could move. I want Aunt Missy to feel stupid for laughing. I want Grandpa to see what he chose not to see. And after they feel that? Her mouth opened, then closed. I did not tell her sending the pictures was wrong. I did not tell her it would make things worse. I waited while she looked at the bruises, the cast, and her own exhausted face. Finally, she locked the screen. I don't know what comes after. That is okay. She placed the phone face down, but did not delete the draft. That evening, Raina emailed with a new deadline for the documentary. She made it clear that Harper could request another extension or submit an entirely different project. Harper read the message twice. I don't want to finish The People Who Made Me. You don't have to. The title isn't true anymore. Before I could ask what she wanted instead, a second email appeared. Linda had copied Raina, me, Walter, and Melissa. She wrote that recent family conflict had made Harper's project inappropriate. She withdrew permission for every photograph, interview, home video, and recorded voice belonging to Linda, Walter, or Melissa. She demanded the immediate return of all original images and any copies stored on Harper's devices. Raina replied only that she had received the request and would discuss the next steps with Harper and me privately. Harper read Linda's email without crying. Her face became calm in the same frightening way it had in the hospital. Grandma just erased herself from my movie, she said, before I even decided whether I wanted to keep her. Raina called the morning after Linda withdrew permission from Harper's documentary. She spoke carefully, knowing every word might sound like a verdict to Harper. The school will respect their request, she said. We will remove Linda, Walter, and Melissa's interviews, photographs, and recorded voices from any version shown publicly. This does not need to become a legal fight. Harper sat beside me with her injured leg elevated and the laptop on a padded tray. Her fingers pressed into the blanket. What about everything I made? She asked. Your edits, written notes, narration, title cards, and project structure are still yours, Raina said. You cannot use material they have withdrawn, but they do not own the work you created around it. After the call, I copied every original photograph onto a new drive, along with Walter's workshop recordings, Melissa's interview, and the scanned anniversary pictures. I left out Harper's timelines, captions, drafts, and private notes. Harper watched the progress bar for most of the morning. They think all of it belongs to them, she said. They gave you the original pictures. They gave me boxes they could not organize. I spent months finding dates, fixing names, and asking people who was standing in the background. I know, I said, and Harper answered, No, you know now. The correction hurt, but I let it stand. At 11:30, a knock rattled the front door. Linda stood on the porch with Walter and Melissa. Walter held a photo box. Melissa carried her phone and the drive Linda had demanded. My first instinct was to tell them to leave before Harper saw them. I had already reached for the lock when I stopped. Harper was watching from the living room. They are all here, I said. Do you want me to send them away, talk to them outside, or let them in? Her surprise hurt. She had expected me to decide. Let them in, she said after a moment. But I am staying here. Do you want anyone to hug you or touch you? No, she said. I nodded and told her I would make that clear before they entered. Harper adjusted the blanket over her brace. Her wheelchair stood beside the sofa, and her walker rested against the coffee table beside exercise bands and a melting ice pack. I almost cleared them away, then realized I was about to hide her recovery from my family. I opened the door, but did not step aside immediately. Harper agreed to talk, I said. Do not touch her unless she asks. If she says the conversation is over, you leave. Linda's mouth tightened. We know how to visit our own granddaughter. You had the opportunity to prove that." Walter looked down. Melissa rolled her eyes, but they entered without arguing further. Linda remained standing until I pointed to the chairs. Walter sat first. Melissa dropped into the other chair with the drive on her knee. Linda took the armchair, clutching her handbag. For several seconds, no one spoke, and Harper did not rescue them from the silence. Linda cleared her throat. "The family is not functioning." I had expected an apology. Even after everything, some part of me had expected one. Linda listed problems instead. The anniversary guest list was incomplete. 2 cousins were no longer speaking. The monthly call and recipe exchange had stopped. An aunt in Ohio believed she had been excluded because nobody corrected an invitation error. "Everyone is upset," Linda said. "Things have always run smoothly, and now they do not." Harper looked at her grandmother without blinking. Melissa lifted the drive. "And these files should never have been held hostage. You are making an entire family pay because my thumb hit the wrong reaction." "You typed words after the emoji?" I said. Melissa turned toward me. "This is between Harper and us." Harper's voice came quietly from the sofa. "Did you come to see me, or did you come to get the things I made?" No one answered immediately. Linda recovered first. "Those are not separate issues. We came because we love you, and because unfinished responsibilities affect other people." "That is not what I asked. We drove all the way here, did we not?" Harper looked at the cardboard box by Walter's feet, then at the drive in Melissa's hand. Walter followed her gaze and finally noticed the wheelchair, raised leg, walker, medication chart, and the strap used to lift her injured limb. His face changed. Walter asked, "Can you stand yet?" Harper answered, "Not by myself." He looked toward me. I thought she was already moving around. "She is learning how to transfer from the sofa to the wheelchair without twisting the repaired femur." Walter stared at the brace. "I did not know it was this bad." Harper's expression hardened. "You knew I was in the hospital." "I knew, but your mother said you were stable." "Stable did not mean fine," Harper said. Linda shifted in her chair. "No one said you were fine. We believed you needed rest." "You believed that after I asked you to come?" Melissa exhaled loudly. "Everybody has a life, Harper. People cannot drop everything every time someone is upset." Harper's hand closed around the blanket. "I have a life too." Her voice rose for the first time. "I had school. I had friends. I had a movie I wanted to make. I still remembered Grandpa's appointments. I fixed Grandma's invitations. I bought cards for you when you forgot. I called people who were mad at each other so they would still come to holidays." Melissa's face lost some of its color. Harper leaned forward, then gasped. Her good hand flew to her thigh as pain seized beneath the brace. I was beside her before the others moved. "Stop," I said. "The visit is over." Linda stood and said, "We are not finished." I answered, "Harper is." I helped her settle back against the pillows. Her breath came shallow and fast. Walter rose slowly, his eyes fixed on the exercise sheet beside the walker. Melissa placed the drive on the coffee table. "We still need the password for the organized archive." "You have the original files," I said. "You do not have Harper's system, notes, or work. She created those from our family history. She created them with her time." Linda opened her mouth, but Walter bent and placed the cardboard box beside the drive. "No more," he said, and Linda turned toward him. "What does that mean?" "It means she does not finish the anniversary film. The event is in less than a month." "Then we do not have a film." Walter looked at Harper. "I should have come that day. I kept telling myself I would call after your grandmother calmed down. Then it got later, and I was ashamed." Linda stared at him. "Do not perform an apology because Samantha has made you feel guilty. I feel guilty because I am guilty." The silence felt like a crack opening beneath something that had looked solid for years. Walter walked to the door without waiting. Melissa followed, muttering that everyone had lost perspective. Linda remained, looking from Harper to the files. This family will not survive. If everyone only thinks about themselves, she said. Harper's face was pale from pain, but her answer was steady. Maybe it should not survive the way it was. After they left, I gave Harper her medication and waited until her breathing slowed. I did not ask what she planned to do with the documentary. She opened the project on her own. One by one, she removed the withdrawn interviews from the timeline. Linda disappeared first, then Melissa, then Walter. Empty spaces opened where their faces had been. Harper did not delete the hospital recording or the old videos she still had permission to use. She only stared at the title card that read, "The People Who Made Me." Then she highlighted the words and erased them. A blank screen waited while Harper looked at the walker, Piper's flowers, and the paper crown Keisha had made. Her fingers moved across the keyboard and replaced the old title with "The People Who Came." I read the new title twice. "Who will the film be about now?" I asked. Harper looked around at the evidence of people who had arrived without reminders. "I want to start with them." Harper filmed Keisha first. Keisha had come by after her shift with a small vanilla cake from the grocery store across from the hospital. The cafeteria had already closed on Harper's birthday, and the gift shop only sold packaged cookies, so Keisha had walked through the rain after midnight to find something that could hold one candle. When Harper asked her to describe what she had done, Keisha waved the camera away. "I bought a cake," she said. "That is not a documentary." Harper kept recording. "Why did you go out after your shift?" Keisha looked embarrassed by the question. "Because you were 14, and a birthday without cake felt wrong." That was all Harper needed. Raina came the following afternoon carrying a tripod borrowed from the media lab. Harper could not stand long enough to frame a shot, and the wheelchair put her too low to reach the adjustment handle. Raina sat cross-legged on our living room floor and showed her how to tilt the camera using the remote controls instead. I started to suggest where Raina should sit, so the window light would fall evenly across her face. The sentence reached the back of my teeth before I stopped it. "What do you want the shot to look like?" I asked Harper. She glanced at me, noticing the correction. "Messy," she said. "Leave the walker in it." I wanted to move the medication baskets and fold the blanket covering Harper's brace. Instead, I left everything where it was. Raina sat on the rug beside the tripod, the walker visible behind her and a strip of physical therapy tape stuck to her sleeve. "What did you do when you heard about the accident?" Harper asked. "I sent your mother 6 messages until she answered." Raina said, "You also extended my deadline." That was not kindness. That was basic sense. "You came here." Raina looked toward the camera. "I came because you should not have to prove you are worth showing up for." Harper lowered the camera for a moment. Her eyes stayed on Raina, but she did not ask another question. Piper's interview happened 2 days later. She sat on the front porch because Harper wanted the evening light behind her. Piper complained that the camera made her look nervous, then forgot about it halfway through the first answer. She admitted that on Harper's second night in the hospital, she had spent 3 hours doing algebra in the hallway. Harper had been sleeping, and the nurses would not allow another visitor in the room. But Piper stayed because I might need coffee or a charger. "You never told me that," Harper said. "You were asleep. You could have gone home." Piper shrugged. "I had algebra either way." Harper laughed, and for a few seconds the camera trembled because her left hand could not hold it steady while she laughed. She kept that part in the footage. The new film grew from actions no one had considered important enough to announce. Daniel building the ramp before dawn. Mrs. Chen leaving soup on our porch without ringing the bell because Harper had finally fallen asleep. Keisha making a crooked paper crown. Raina sitting on the floor. Piper waiting in a hallway where no one could see her. I caught myself trying to organize them into a cleaner sequence. "Keisha should come before the hospital hallway footage," I said one evening. Then Raina, because school comes after the medical section, and Piper can bridge into home recovery. Harper stared at the screen. I heard myself and took a breath. Do you want help arranging it, or do you want me to watch? I only want you to watch. I moved my hands away from the keyboard. She placed each person according to the feeling of the scene, rather than the order in which things happened. Piper's hallway came before the cake. Raina's interview followed an empty shot of the wheelchair. The film did not explain every connection, but it felt honest in a way the anniversary project never had. Then Harper added the screenshot. Linda's question appeared across the screen. Melissa's laughing reaction sat directly below it. Walter's silence was visible in the row of red receipts. Harper stretched the image across 12 seconds of the timeline. People need to know why the door was empty, she said. I wanted to agree. Part of me wanted Linda's words projected large enough that no one could shrink them into a misunderstanding again. Raina studied the timeline without touching the mouse. What do you want people watching this film to look at? She asked. I want them to see the truth. That is not what I asked. Harper folded her arms carefully over the blanket. I want them to know who hurt me. Raina nodded. Then the screenshot does that. But if it stays, what will the audience remember when the film ends? The people who were absent, or the people who came? She did not tell Harper to remove it. She packed the tripod and left the question behind. The screenshot remained in the timeline for 4 days. Harper shortened it from 12 seconds to 8, then 5. She moved it to the beginning, then near the end. Each time we watched the film, Linda and Melissa pulled every scene toward them. Keisha's cake became a response to their cruelty. Piper's waiting became proof that they had failed. Even Raina's words sounded like an accusation. On the 5th night, Harper selected the image and pressed delete. I said nothing until she looked at me. I am not forgiving them, she said. I know you are not. I just do not want Aunt Missy's emoji to own the best thing I have made. The empty gap closed, and Piper's laugh moved directly into the next scene. While Harper rebuilt the film, the anniversary collapsed without her. Walter called me once, not to ask for files, but to tell me he had refused to read the speech Linda wrote. It praised their 40 years of marriage and described them as the center that had kept 4 generations together. I cannot stand in front of everyone and take credit for that, he said. Harper did more to keep those people speaking than either of us. Linda postponed the celebration the same afternoon. In the message she sent relatives, she blamed family tensions created by my refusal to cooperate. Melissa began calling people before they could call her. She said I had manipulated Harper, withheld family property, and turned an accidental reaction into an excuse to punish everyone. For the first time, her version did not travel smoothly. Cousin Beth called her back and asked one question. Why did you send a laughing face when Harper was in the hospital? Melissa said her thumb had slipped. Beth asked why the words beneath it had slipped too. Melissa tried to laugh. Beth did not join her. That silence traveled farther through the family than any explanation I could have given. A week before Harper's new deadline, we transferred the final hospital footage from her camera. She sorted the cards by the labels written in black marker. Keisha, hallway, physical therapy, Piper visit. The last card read, birthday door. Harper held it between her fingers. That is the whole day, she said. The camera facing the door? She nodded. The computer waited for the card, but Harper did not insert it. She placed it inside the top drawer of the desk and closed it. That night, I passed her room 3 times. Each time, the drawer was open. Harper would look inside, touch the edge of the memory card, then close the drawer without taking it out. I finally understood that the card no longer held a recording. It held every minute my daughter had waited for someone to choose her without being reminded. Harper's physical therapist introduced the cane on a Thursday afternoon. For 2 weeks, Harper had been moving short distances with the walker. The cane was supposed to be the next step, a sign that her left leg was learning to trust her weight again. She had talked about it all morning, as if earning the cane would prove the accident was finally losing its hold on her. The first 6 steps went well. On the 7th, her knee buckled. The therapist caught her before she fell, but Harper's face changed the moment both feet were safely beneath her again. She tried a second time. Pain tightened through her thigh, and she froze halfway across the parallel bars. "I can do it," she insisted. Her therapist told her that stopping was not failure. Harper asked to try once more, then managed only 3 steps before tears slid down her face. In the car, she turned toward the window and refused to speak. I almost told her she had made progress. I almost explained that healing was uneven, and that one bad session meant nothing. Instead, I asked, "Do you want me to talk, or do you want quiet?" Quiet. I drove home without filling it. Harper went directly to her room after we helped her out of the car. She left the cane beside the desk and used the walker to reach her bed. The movement exhausted her enough that she did not notice the top drawer had been left open. The memory card labeled "Birthday, Door" lay inside. I stood there after Harper fell asleep, looking at the small rectangle of black plastic. It would have taken one movement to snap it between my fingers, another few seconds to erase it from the computer. The urge frightened me, because it felt so familiar. Remove the danger before Harper had to face it. Make the decision quickly enough that pain could not argue back. I picked up the card. Then I set it on the desk and walked away. Harper woke near dinner. Her eyes went first to the cane, then to the card. "You took it out." I almost deleted it. She looked at me sharply. "I didn't," I said, "but I wanted to." "Why?" "Because you were already hurting, and I did not want that recording to make today worse." Harper stared at the card. I sat in the desk chair, leaving the space beside her bed open. "You can watch it alone," I said. "We can watch it together. We can send it to Raina without watching it, or put it back in the drawer and never use it." "You would really let me never watch it?" "Yes." "And you will not watch it without me?" "No." She reached for the card, then stopped before touching it. "Watch it with me," she said. "But do not say anything while it is playing." I promised. We transferred the file to her computer. The recording lasted more than 9 hours. Harper dragged the timeline to the beginning, shortly after Keisha had placed the camera on the windowsill. The first image was almost ordinary. The hospital door stood closed in the center of the frame. The empty visitor chair occupied the lower corner. Morning light lay pale across the floor. A cart rolled past outside, its wheels rattling over a seam in the hallway tile. A nurse's shadow crossed the narrow strip beneath the door. Somewhere out of frame, Harper was telling me that Piper would hate the hospital pudding. The elevator chimed. Harper's voice stopped. For several seconds, the only sound was the air vent above the bed. Footsteps approached, slowed near the door, then continued past it. Harper resumed her sentence as if nothing had happened. The light changed gradually. The white strip beneath the door became brighter, then warmer. Meal carts came and went. Rubber soles squeaked. A child cried somewhere down the hall. Nurses exchanged shift information in voices too distant to understand. Each time the elevator opened, Harper stopped speaking. Sometimes the pause lasted only a second. Sometimes she asked me to check the hallway. Once, the camera captured my arm entering the frame as I opened the door and looked outside. No one was there. Afternoon shadows lengthened across the empty chair. A balloon from another room floated past the narrow window in the door, followed by a woman carrying flowers. Harper watched without moving. The small sounds hurt more than the group messages had. The messages had taken seconds. This was every minute that followed them. The recording reached the moment Keisha brought the cupcake. From outside the frame, I heard myself ask Harper to make a wish. There was a long silence. Then Harper said, "Maybe they will come before the candle goes out." Beside me, the real Harper drew in a sharp breath. The flame was not visible. Only the door and the empty chair remained on screen. The elevator chimed once more. The girl in the recording stopped breathing for half a second, waiting. That was where Harper broke. She covered her mouth with her good hand, but the sound escaped anyway. Her shoulders folded forward, and I moved to the bed without touching her, until she leaned against me. I left it running because I wanted proof. she said between breaths. Proof of what? That they came without me reminding them again. Her forehead pressed against my shoulder. I thought if I turned it off, they would walk in right after. Then I would never know whether they chose me on their own. I held her carefully, avoiding the wrist that was still stiff and tender. That day, I only saw the messages, I said. You had to live through every minute after them. Harper cried until exhaustion slowed her breathing. When she finally sat back, she did not close the file. She moved through the recording again, searching rather than watching. Near sunset, she selected a section beginning with the empty chair and ending after the final elevator chime. 47 seconds. Is that enough? I asked. It is the truth without making everyone sit through the whole day. She placed the clip at the end of The People Who Came. 2 days later, Linda contacted the school administration and demanded that the screening be canceled. She described Harper's film as a private family dispute involving a minor and claimed the school was allowing me to use my daughter for public retaliation. Raina called us after meeting with the principal. The film contains no names, images, interviews, or identifiable voices belonging to anyone who withdrew permission, she said. The hospital footage was recorded inside Harper's private room. No other patient is identifiable. The screening will continue. Harper thanked her and ended the call without celebrating. That afternoon, Walter's letter arrived. The envelope carried only Harper's name. There was no gift and no request that she call him. She opened it at the kitchen table while I sat across from her. Walter had written a list. I read your mother's message and did not answer. I saw Melissa laugh and did not tell her to stop. I thought about driving to the hospital and stayed home. I told myself I would come later. I allowed shame to become another reason not to come. I made you wait for a grandfather who already knew where you were. There was no sentence beginning with but. He did not ask for forgiveness or explain what he had intended to do. Harper folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. Do you want to answer? I asked. No. I left it there. The following week, the school released the screening program. Harper's film appeared beneath the student documentary section under its new title. During the final technical rehearsal, I saw Linda near the auditorium entrance holding a printed copy. Walter stood beside her. Linda stared at the title for several seconds. Does this mean she took us out of the film? She asked. Walter looked through the open doors toward the empty screen. Maybe we just were not in the story she decided to tell. On the afternoon of the screening, Harper stood at the bottom of our stairs with one hand around her cane and the other gripping the banister. She had changed clothes twice, before choosing black pants, a loose blue shirt, and the paper crown Keisha had made, flattened now and taped along one side. By the time she reached the living room, her face had gone pale. You do not have to go, I said. The old version of me would have added that she should stay home. I still worried about the walk, the hard seats, and the possibility that Linda or Melissa might appear. I just did not turn those fears into a decision for her. Do you want to go tonight? I asked. Harper waited for her breathing to settle. Yes, I want to see it on the real screen. Then we go. We can leave before, during, or after. You tell me. Riverton High had converted its smallest auditorium into a showcase space for the student media program. Families filled most of the seats while students checked cables and hurried between the projection booth and the stage. Raina had reserved the first 2 rows for student filmmakers and the people appearing in their work. Keisha arrived still wearing navy scrub pants beneath her coat. Piper brought Harper sour candy. Daniel and Mrs. Chen sat near the aisle. Harper lowered herself into the seat between Piper and me. The effort left her breathing through her teeth. When I asked whether she still wanted to stay, she nodded without hesitation. A few minutes before the lights dimmed, the auditorium door opened. Linda entered first. Walter followed, then Melissa. They paused when they saw the reserved rows, but no one invited them forward. They took 3 seats near the back. My body tightened. Harper noticed. Do not ask them to leave, she said. I do not want tonight to become about whether they are allowed in the room. The lights dimmed before they could approach us. Harper's film was the fourth in the program. The screen went black, then the title appeared in small white letters, "The People Who Came." There was no image of the accident, the group chat, or Harper's injuries. The first shot showed Keisha's hands cutting blue stars from a hospital menu. Her scissors caught on the glossy paper, and she muttered before beginning again. Harper's voice came through the speakers. "When I turned 14, somebody made me a crown that was crooked because she had been working all night." Keisha covered her mouth beside me. The film moved to Daniel, measuring our porch before sunrise. One end of the tape measure snapped against the wood and made him jump. "Mrs. Chen appeared setting soup outside our door and walking away without ringing the bell. "I used to think showing up had to be a big thing," Harper said. "Sometimes it was a ramp. Sometimes it was food left quietly because I was asleep." Piper appeared next, sitting on the hospital floor with algebra spread around her. She complained that no one should have to solve for two unknown numbers beside a vending machine that ate $5. Several people laughed. Piper lowered her head, smiling. Raina's interview followed. The walker remained visible behind her. "You should not have to prove you are worth showing up for," Raina said. The film did not explain who had failed that test. It did not have to. The images grew more personal. Keisha adjusted Harper's blanket without waking her. Piper steadied the camera while Harper learned to stand. I appeared asleep in the hospital chair, one hand still resting on the edge of Harper's mattress. Harper's narration stayed simple. "My mom sometimes decides things too fast. She also slept in a chair that hurt her back because I was scared when I woke up. She had not made me a hero. She had allowed me to be there." The audience gradually stopped waiting for a villain. The film showed the shape created by repeated acts of presence. Then the screen darkened. The hospital door appeared in the center of the frame. The empty chair occupied the lower corner. There was no music. A cart rattled past. The air vent hummed. Somewhere outside the frame, the recorded Harper was speaking about hospital pudding. The elevator chimed. Her voice stopped. In the auditorium, someone shifted in a seat. Footsteps approached the door and continued past it. Recorded Harper resumed speaking. Afternoon light moved across the floor. The elevator chimed again. Her voice stopped again. 47 seconds is not long until everyone understands what they are waiting for. No one opened the door. Near the end, my recorded voice asked Harper to make a birthday wish. After a pause, she answered, "Maybe they will come before the candle goes out." Behind me, Linda whispered, "Turn it off." The film continued because no one in the projection booth had any reason to obey her. The screen faded to black. One sentence appeared. "Some people made me by coming. Others made me by showing me what absence costs." The room remained silent after the words disappeared. Then the applause began. It was not thunderous. No one stood. The sound simply grew until Harper's face turned red and she looked down at her cane. Keisha took her hand. Piper leaned her shoulder against hers. After the program, Harper stayed seated while the crowd moved around us. Raina knelt beside her and asked whether she wanted the lobby or the side door. Harper chose the side door. We had nearly reached it when Melissa stepped into the aisle. "You made us look cruel," she said. She spoke to me, not Harper. I moved slightly between them without blocking Harper's view. "The film did not make you absent," I said. "You were absent." Melissa stared at me as if she had expected a longer fight. Linda approached more slowly. "One afternoon cannot erase 40 years of family." Harper's hand began to tremble around the cane. I saw it and forced myself not to answer for her. Linda looked directly at her. "What do you want us to do, Harper? Tell us how to fix this." Harper swallowed. The remaining voices and scraping chairs seemed to press against her. "I do not know what you want from me," she said. Linda's face tightened. "I want to repair this." "No. I do not know if you want me, or if you want everything to feel normal again." Linda opened her mouth, But Harper continued. I do not know how to fix it. I do not know if I want visits or letters or nothing for a while. I am tired, and I do not want to make the plan for everybody this time. Walter stepped away from the back wall. That is what she has been doing, he said. For years. Linda turned toward him. Walter, this is not the time. It is exactly the time. We are asking her to organize our apology the same way she organized everything else. Melissa folded her arms. So what are we supposed to do? Disappear? Harper flinched at the word. I answered before Melissa could use it again. Any contact happens at Harper's pace. Not Linda's, not yours, and not mine. Linda looked at me. You are her mother. You cannot leave a child to decide something this serious. I can stop deciding it without her. Walter nodded once. Linda did not. We left through the side door. The cold air hit Harper hard enough that she paused on the steps. I asked whether she wanted my arm. She said yes, and I let her choose where to hold me. Halfway to the car, she stopped. Do not block any more numbers for me, she said. I told her I would not. I do not want to answer them either. You do not have to. Harper tightened her grip on my sleeve. Just do not answer until I say I am ready. This time, I did not promise to protect her from whatever came next. I promised to wait. By December, Harper could walk from the school entrance to the media room with a cane, as long as she rested before attempting the trip back. She returned 3 mornings a week at first. The school arranged a chair near the elevator, extra time between classes, and permission to leave whenever the pain or fatigue became too much. She hated every accommodation for the first 2 weeks, then admitted the chair near the elevator was useful. 4 months after the accident, healing no longer looked dramatic. There were no emergency alarms or surgeons rushing through doors. It looked like Harper rubbing her thigh beneath a desk, sleeping for 2 hours after half a day at school, and celebrating when she managed the front steps without asking me to steady her. I was learning not to turn every difficult moment into a problem I had to solve. That was one reason we began counseling together. Our therapist, Dr. Elaine Foster, said she was not there to repair Harper because Harper was not broken. She was there to help us notice the difference between care and control, privacy and secrecy, support and rescue. During our 3rd session, Dr. Foster asked what happened when one of us was afraid. I make plans, I said. Harper gave a tired smile. She makes plans for both of us. And you? Dr. Foster asked her. I make sure nobody knows I'm afraid. Harper looked at me after saying it. I did not tell her that she never had to hide anything from me. That would have made her responsible for proving she believed me. Instead, I said, I want to become someone you do not have to protect. The answer did not erase what I had missed, but Harper reached for my hand before we left. At home, the Family Fixes folder remained on her computer. Harper stopped opening it, but she refused to delete it. I don't want to pretend I never did those things, she explained. They took years of my life. Deleting the folder would make it look like none of it mattered. She moved it into an archive, labeled Finished. After that, birthdays arrived without her reminders. Arguments continued, without her drafting apologies. Invitations went out with mistakes, no 14-year-old corrected in secret. The Bellamy anniversary did not happen. Linda canceled it rather than stand beneath a slideshow, praising a family unity everyone now knew she had not created. The relatives who had planned to travel made separate visits to one another instead. Cousin Beth began a new group chat, without appointing anyone as its center. People called Walter directly. They asked Melissa questions without going through Linda. For the first time, my mother had to watch the family continue without revolving around her. When plans failed, no one called Harper. That consequence hurt Linda more than public embarrassment could have. Her authority had depended on everyone believing she remembered, coordinated, soothed, and connected them. Once Harper stopped doing that work invisibly, Linda was left with the reputation but none of the machinery beneath it. Melissa handled the change differently. She continued telling relatives that I had manipulated Harper during a vulnerable time. When conversations became uncomfortable, she tried to make jokes. Fewer people laughed. At Cousin Elaine's holiday lunch, Melissa made a remark about Harper producing another award-winning family tragedy. Beth looked at her and asked what part was supposed to be funny. Melissa left early. After that, relatives stopped asking her to organize birthdays, showers, or holiday dinners. No one trusted her to take another person's feelings seriously when they became inconvenient. She blamed me for that too. Harper did not ask me to defend her. She also did not ask to see Melissa. Walter wrote every other Sunday. His letters did not mention how lonely he was, or how much he missed Harper. He did not ask when she would forgive him. Each letter described one thing he had done differently. He had attended his cardiology appointment without a reminder. He had called his brother and apologized without asking Harper to write the words. He had corrected Linda when she told someone the anniversary failed because of me. Harper kept the letters in a shoebox beneath her desk. She had not agreed to see him. Walter continued writing anyway. Linda sent one letter. It was 12 pages long and began with everything she had sacrificed over 40 years. She described caring for relatives, hosting holidays, paying bills when other people struggled, and staying married through difficult seasons. Near the end, she wrote that Harper would understand one day how painful it was to have a lifetime of love judged by one mistake. Harper read the first page, folded the letter, and placed it on the table. "I'm not ready." I did not finish it for her. I did not summarize it, defend Linda, or advise Harper to throw it away. I placed it inside a box in the hall closet. "You decide when it comes out," I said. Harper nodded, and we left it there. Her next film began as a collection of ordinary footage. A custodian straightening chairs after an empty auditorium, Piper returning a library book she had found under a bus seat, Keisha covering a sleeping patient's feet after the family had gone home, Raina staying late to label equipment no student would notice had been organized. Harper called the project After the Camera Stops. "It's about what people do when they think nobody will remember," she told me. By then, she had completed 1 full week of partial school attendance without leaving early. Raina, Piper, and Keisha came to our house for a small dinner to celebrate. Keisha arrived with another grocery store cake, though this time she bought 16 candles by mistake. Piper brought algebra homework and claimed it was decorative. Raina placed a small camera lens cap beside Harper's plate as a joke because Harper had lost 4 of them since starting media arts. No one called the evening a reunion or a replacement celebration. Daniel's ramp was still attached to the porch. Harper's cane rested against her chair. Her medication alarm sounded halfway through dinner, and she swallowed the tablets while Piper complained about a teacher who believed weekends were an opportunity for additional assignments. The room did not become silent or uncomfortable. The conversation simply made space for what Harper needed and continued. I carried a bowl from the kitchen and found Harper placing her camera on the bookshelf. She adjusted the angle toward the table, checked the battery, and pressed record. The red light appeared. For a moment, she looked toward the front door. I recognized the habit before she did. Part of her was still waiting for footsteps, still measuring love through proof that could be replayed later. Keisha called from the table, asking whether Harper planned to let everyone eat the cake before it became an archaeological discovery. Piper had already stolen icing from one corner. Raina was laughing, while pretending not to notice. Harper looked at the people seated in our living room. Then she reached up and turned off the camera. The red light disappeared. She returned to the table and lowered herself carefully into the chair. No one applauded the decision. No one asked what it meant. Piper passed her a plate. Keisha lit the mismatched candles, and Raina moved Harper's cane closer without interrupting the conversation. I watched my daughter close her eyes while everyone sang. She did not make a wish out loud. When the song ended, she opened her eyes and looked around the table before blowing out the candles. No one had been reminded to come. No one needed Harper to explain what to say, smooth over an argument, or make their presence easier. They had simply arrived and stayed. In the hospital, Harper had not lost a family. She had lost the role that forced her to hold other people together so they would not leave. It was the first loss that had ever set her free. For the first time since her father died, Harper did not point the camera at the door. She turned it off, came back to the table, and trusted the people in the room to still be there when the moment was over.